So for this week's project, I thought it would be good to make chairs the theme, or a chair. So this, you're going to get a tour of my palatial home again, but this chair is known here as Prince Philip's chair, because the lady who sold it to Ruth in the charity shop said that Prince Philip had once sat on it. I'm looking at it from different angles. I think it looks good from this angle because I like it against the light. And I'm going to use it as a bit of a stage, perhaps. So how can you work with the chair as a theme? I'm going to try and illustrate this a little bit with just actually setting things up first and then doing some drawing and some painting. But just to talk you through some ideas. Now, we've discussed this quite a lot with some of the other projects. In a way, setting things up, editing, leaving things out, deciding what it is that you want to paint is a really big part of the whole process. So I would suggest doing this first. Explore what the possibilities are of chairs in your house before even putting pencil to paper or charcoal to paper, and then follow through these other processes. So I do like those paintings by Jason Long. I sent you one example. Where he's isolated these chairs, and they're often stacked with books. I think they're art books. He sometimes has a postcard, sometimes recognizable image on the pile of books. So I'm just trying that out. I've got some art and other books on top of the chair, on the floor. His look like they're an interesting combination because they look like that's what he does. He's got piles of books, but they're also, in a way, tidied up. It's a very clean, neat way of painting, and he likes to look, I think, at the light. So, I might be wanting to come back a bit and include the shadows on the floor. So that's one possibility. Let's go and look at some others. Different room, different chair. This is don't know who sat on this chair, but I was also thinking of the work of John Register that I sent you an image of as well. And his chairs seem to represent people. So I was wondering, it'd be nice to work with this small chair, the small chair and the big chair. They, if I'd just shown you the small chair, or if I painted the small chair, you wouldn't know it was small. But the comparison with the other, the larger chair, is interesting. I often think of that. There's next to the studio. There's a place that sells these motility vehicles, and they also had various armchairs in the window. A while back, they were advertising. Want to see the cats? Here are my cats. They were advertising these chairs. One was called Will's, and the other was called Kate. And there were these armchairs sort of sitting side by side in the shop window. So they were just, they made you think of people. So you might want to do something with chairs that represent people. And John Register, in his work, there's lots of waiting rooms and similar sort of spaces with empty chairs, but you instantly connect them with people. Another interesting chair, completely fallen apart. But with some clothes. It could be a portrait of someone in particular, thinking of Van Gogh's painting of Gauguin's chair, where various artifacts represent the individual. So this is probably Ruth's chair with her dress and the desk. Another sort of chair, one of these directors' fold-up chairs. Again, Jason Long, I think in particular, has some paintings of more modern chairs where he's really got into the kind of geometry, abstracted, simplified, the geometric quality of some of these modern chairs. And he's also sometimes using mirrors to add to that quality. My mirror is a bit small, so I need to go quite close to get some of that. So that's a little bit of a variety. I've not said so much about maybe using the chair as a kind of stage. Maybe it can represent a person, it can be a kind of portrait, maybe the lack of person is the quality that you're after. But I would recommend you start by having a good look around at your chairs. Take a viewfinder or even use a camera or a phone as I'm doing, because you can do a lot of composing early on and you can see straight away what different angles mean or what they generate and whether you want to spend time on them. So now I'm going to make up my mind and do one or two drawings and then move on to a painting. So I'm going to start by doing some small drawings. This is half A4, or not quite half A4, but I've got a 4B pencil, doing a few more things in pencil at the moment. And I don't want to, well, I want to find a composition, or really this is about deciding, do I want to paint this? So just sketch out something of the chair. I've come close, I'm looking down on it because I think I see my chair as a bit of a stage here, and I've got art books, so maybe that's a little bit what it's about. And I'm drawing with my 4B pencil, and actually the thing that I really love is that the book is open at a Chardin painting, and maybe that's what, if this is helping me decide, not can I draw it, am I able, do I have the ability to draw it, but do I want to spend time on this subject? I think maybe it's, as I draw, I'm thinking, well, actually, it's that book with the Chardin picture that I really want to draw attention to. So the chair seat is a kind of stage. The other parts of the chair are attractive and decorative, but I'm not going to overdo them, if I come to paint this. I also put some, looking at Jason Long, I've put some things on the books on the floor as well, because this is essentially a still life setup. So it's quite nice to have different levels. So there's another level down here where there are other books. It could be other things. I've gone for books. And also there's a little bit of a pattern of light, which is quite nice on that floor. Some of the books a little bit in shadow. So I'm doing a line drawing, not just to see, can I draw these objects, this chair, but as I say, to ask myself a little bit, do I want to draw them? Do I want to spend time and turn this into a painting? I chose this angle as well because I like it to be against the light a bit. So as well as putting in some of these lines to find my chair, I'll also look with my eyes half closed, do a bit of hatching just to sort out some light and dark. And again, perhaps that will really, if I have an aim to make a lot of this open book with the Chardin picture, then the fact that that's got white pages framing the painting, I won't go too far with that, but just to put it into its position as being important in my composition, and then not to include anything else. I think if I want to draw attention to that part of the subject, then I probably shouldn't have anything else apart from the other level of the books on the floor, the shadows cast, and maybe modelling. It's quite nice to model the chair with its dark front but light tops. So that's one possibility. I suppose what I want to encourage you to do this time is to spend time on planning, trying out these different possibilities, and maybe finding some quick ways of of working with the different possibilities, and then take time to look at what you've done before you embark on a painting. So that's this chair. Let's go and look at the others. So these two chairs, I wanted to make something of the fact that they're different sizes, sort of grown-up chair, child chair, and I wanted to make something of the fact that they're empty. So I'm going to do a sort of more tonal, so I'm against the light. I've got the backs of them. I don't know why the backs of them might emphasise the fact that they're empty more than the fronts. And this time I'm going to use a bit of ink and wash. And I think I'll maybe just start with the wash, because having done what I did with the last chair, I feel maybe with this, just to give you a bit of variety of demonstration, I should probably use the setting a bit in this this drawing. So back of that chair, and then this one here. So I'm using dilute ink, so ink that has been diluted with water. I'm using a big lump of sponge because I want to get more of the sort of tonal quality. I could have started with lines, but I think it's actually quite good, especially with this medium. If you start with the sponge and the tone, then you're going to be a little bit looser and a bit more economical. So that's what I get with those. But as I said, I thought it might be also quite nice with this subject matter to get something of the background, although the background is only a sofa and cats. So let's see what happens, because there's now this really amazing, I'm not going to do the cats, sorry, but there's this amazing light coming through. So I just want to give you something different as a demonstration, but just also for my own purposes, to see what works, what to add, what to leave out. So I'm going to pause a second just while that wash dries, and then we're going to put some lines on top. So I've now got my pot of undiluted ink and my sharpened stick, and I'm going to introduce some lines, and maybe I'll just introduce the lines to the chairs but not to the background, see if that makes a good difference. And I realise actually the reason why I started with the wash was also because I've got these empty chairs, and potentially all I've got to paint is chairs. It would be very easy to get hung up on lines and the architecture of chairs, and by putting down the wash first, I think I'm more likely to do less with these lines. That tends to be the way when you're working with ink and wash. If you can put down a pattern of tonal shapes, however approximate, you tend to find when you get to applying lines, you're much more economical. You don't need so many, so you can be more selective. So that's that little chair, and then the big chair is this wonderful flamboyant bit of chair architecture with all its sweeping bits, which will work very nicely in line. Maybe some points to make about the architecture of chairs in space. These back legs are lower than the front legs, or the back feet, if you like. And by doing that, my floor rises a bit, so I can get some of the perspective. And I'm actually sitting on the floor because I want it to be a bit lower, give a different angle, but it still means I can see the seat. And that's important. I wanted an empty seat, because that's what I've suggested might be what this drawing is all about. So I'll pause just while I do the rest. So I've added some lines, and now I'm going to just put on a little bit more wash. I did suggest the sofa, the carpet, not too much, didn't do the cats because I want it to be about the chairs. I want to really be as eloquent as possible about the chairs, but I want to stress that for me, the point of the exercise isn't can you draw a chair, it's can you make an interesting composition? Can the chairs be a vehicle for some sort of narrative, some sort of atmosphere? And because I've got these chairs against the light, I'd quite like to block them in again a bit more. And some of my ink isn't completely dry, so I can actually use that wash. I can kind of strengthen that wash slightly. And in that way, I think I'll make more of the fact that these chairs are against the light, and maybe because I'll make more of them being empty, because once I darken up some of the frame with a bit more wash, actually the seats are light, and therefore their emptiness is perhaps made more obvious, and maybe a bit of shadows on the floor as well would be good. So that was just a couple of possibilities that I've tried to illustrate, and I've chosen some techniques which I think perhaps are suitable for the different sorts of chairs and what I might be aiming for. Next I'm going to do a little painting and remind you about simplifying and see what that leads me to. So I'm going to make a start on a painting, a study. Here's my setup. Excuse me, sniffing. And here is the surface I'm going to paint on. So that was my sketch. That's about half of A5. So my piece of card is tiny. And maybe just to remind you, I think if you do a bit of work on a study, a thumbnail like this, and you've maybe done a few and you've decided this is the version that really works, then it's quite good to ignore your subject, your setup, your model, and spend a few minutes transferring this information onto your study. And I'm going to go a little bit further in that I think it would be quite nice. I've decided, looking at the drawings and the setup, that it would be quite nice to have more space down here. So I'm going to actually make my chair even smaller, but I'm going to start with the drawing and get things just mapped out, first with the usual dilute brown, and then I'm going to block in paint with some card, and I'm of course going to be remembering all that I learnt last week from simplifying. So that might mean a number of things, trying to mix colours as three light, dark, three colours or tones, light, middle and dark. That seems a bit small, so maybe I should just take it away. I've got a funny bit of shiny card, which actually I think it's properly primed. So I would like it to be just a little bit bigger. But I still want it to be a bit more in the top left-hand corner. So that's going to be there. I'm also looking down on my chair, so there's a little bit of foreshortening and some perspective. So this end is going to be a bit wider than this end. I've got to get those proportions right as well. So no harm in, and actually in the drawing they go that way, don't they? Yes, they really go that way. So that's quite nice. And no harm in making a few attempts, and it's a good reason to also have, keep things monochrome, don't use too much paint. Then you're more inclined to change things, if you're not if you haven't invested too much in this stage, it's easy to change things. So that's got my scale. I am now looking back at my subject and just seeing because I'm ultimately going to really bring out this little book with Chardin. So just going to do a little bit of work on sort of identifying where that is. I find that useful now rather than later on discovering that it just doesn't really work the way I'd hoped. So I've just done a little bit more drawing of some of the darker lines, sort of accents. And then I'm going to stop and mix up some paint. And I think I would start actually by, having found my book, I think I would start by painting the carpet. And I think I should make up some colours which are the lighter colour of the carpet and the colour of the shadows on the carpet. And in that way I'll end up painting around my chair and my books on the floor. I'll paint the negative shape, and actually from where I am here, these books disappear under the chair, which is quite nice because it's another way of connecting things. So I think that's something I'm going to include. So I'll mix paint. So we're going to start blocking in some of the colour for the background. See here, there's my chair. I've got a sofa and other things in the room, but I'm just going to, I like what I see in the drawing, which is just an isolated chair. So I'll just start with some of these negative shapes. And actually, it's easy enough up here for me to see where things go. Once I get on the floor, it might be easier just to paint the shadows first. So why don't I'll do a bit more up the top of the chair. So I'm using card again. I've said to remind you about simplifying, and I think the card really helps with simplifying as well. It gives you a more decisive way of applying the paint, because you can't do many fiddly things. So for example, my chair's got this fancy bit of shaping on some of those crossbars, but I won't be able to do that yet. I'll do that, maybe I'll do it with the brush, a smaller bit of card after. But first I'm just wanting to get some of these negative shapes locked in. And what I like about the card as well is that because it's a bit clumsy, you won't get paint in exactly the right place, and that will mean that the paint will inevitably mix, colours bump into each other. If you like, because they're not quite in the right place, so you end up tidying up a bit. So now what do we do? Because there seems to be two shadows. It's a bit odd. Why would there be two shadows? No, I think I just want one actually, because I don't understand why. So some shadows coming off the chair legs and under the books. And the shadows of the books are quite big. And that leg's also got a shadow. And so having identified the shadow colours, or the shadow areas, if I've got enough paint, I can then start to paint up to them. And as I've been saying, the colours, the colours will mix a bit. as I go up to the edge of the shadows. Because there's more excuses, of course, because this is such slippery card. Actually, I've put the paint on really thick. Otherwise, you see all those lines. So I better mix up some more paint. Anyway, that's starting to work a bit between shadows and light areas. I'll borrow a bit from over there, just for now. So, beginning to take shape between the background divided just into light and dark. The dark looks a bit too dark, doesn't it? So, again, let's demonstrate, make it a real demonstration. So what I've done actually on my palette, I've just mixed together. I've mixed some of the light into that shadow colour. So I think it was too dark. That's what you can do with oil paint. You can change things, and it would just be good to soften that a bit more. I've mixed that on the painting, so it's softened it slightly. But I'll be happy with that for now, and I'll see what happens once other colours are on. But I'd certainly be ready to change it again. Because, you know, my painting's pretty simple. A chair and some books. So I do want to get... I didn't want that, did I? I do want to get the colours working to suit that simple subject matter. So I think my videos might be going on a bit too long these days. So I'm going to learn time-lapse actually, but for the last few minutes, I'll just do one or two more things, but I'll keep pausing the video, so it'll be a kind of time-lapse experience. So just a final word about the process and emphasis. So what I was really interested in for my composition, based around the chair, was this book, this art book with a lovely painting by Chardin. So what I've done in building up this painting is I've gone from the big areas, the background, I worked on the big areas of the chair, then I did some of the other books, and I'm just coming to a conclusion really with this, because this is A5, I think. It's smaller than half A4, so it's between A5 and A6. So it's a small painting. I'll put my hand there. You know, my hand just covers it. So there's only so much I can do detail-wise, but that's great. You know, that really ties in with what we looked at last week, simplification. But I've worked my way towards this book with that image. I'm not going to be able to make it look like a recognizable Chardin image, but that's not my aim in this little study. But my aim has been to work with the emphasis. What am I trying to emphasize? What am I trying to make stand out? And that's why I've left this book. I mean, I chose the book with its sort of light and dark, its white pages, as a subject that I knew I could really bring out. But I've organised the painting so that I'm coming to that later on. I've dealt with other things. And now, if I can do it, because it's so bloomin' tiny, I've put in some dark in the middle, and now I've got a sort of lighter grey, white, and I'm just going to put that on my bits of card. to get some of that. Because it's small, I don't have to stand back too much. I can sort of see as I do it, more or less. And actually I'm filming this, as you know, so you can look at the camera, which is also quite useful. So that's that page, and then the corner of the other page up here, which is really catching the light. Try not to bump into the red. But I've been suggesting, especially last week with the simplification, working small. And if you can work with oils, it's great because the colours bump into each other and they'll mix a bit. So you can get better and better at managing that mixing. So there's a bit of blending, but not too much, not muddying, woo. But what was there to say? So you can manage that. But also, yes, the eye fills in a lot. So the things that you don't get to paint, I'm not painting the text, or I've actually left some of the bits of that book unpainted, and just the sort of stained surface is almost enough to fill it in. I didn't quite finish the books down here, and you'll see if you compare with the chair, there's all sorts of intricacies in the chair which I could possibly add in, but maybe I wouldn't because they might distract from the book that I'm trying to draw attention to. And I think now that I see the colours working, possibly lighten the floor a little bit more. So I wanted you to see the process a little bit speeded up and make the point about what I'm working towards, emphasising that book. There's still things that I would change, and the decision might be do I change them on this little study, or am I ready to do something bigger? And I think you just got to work that out for yourselves. Some people like to rehearse things and get various issues sorted out and then paint the painting. Other people find that they've lost enthusiasm by the time they've rehearsed it a few times. So you've got to just gauge that for yourselves, I think. But if we were to connect this with the last exercise, it might be quite nice to go from a small study, as I've done here, the size of my hand, to doing something bigger, but keeping that simplification. So I would have to scale up the brushes or the pieces of card, still work in a similar way, but all the marks would be much bigger. And then I could go on to put in the little head of the woman in the Chardin painting. I'd be able to go further, but still keeping that simplification. Okay, well, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.